Jake Morrison stood in his office on the council station, looking out at the stars through the massive viewing window. The office had been his home for 5 years, ever since he became Earth's main representative to the Galactic Council. Tomorrow, it would be empty. He picked up a small photo from his desk. It showed his wife and daughter back on Earth. He had missed so many birthdays and holidays, all for the hope that humanity could find its place among the stars. Now he was finally going home, but not the way he had planned. The door chimed, and his assistant Carol Davis walked in. She carried a data pad and looked worried. "The final paperwork is ready, sir," she said. "Are you sure about this?" Jake took the pad and signed it with his finger. The document was simple and direct. It said that humanity was leaving the Galactic Council. No long explanations. No angry words. Just a formal notice that Earth was done. "I'm sure," Jake said. "We gave them 30 years. We tried everything we could think of. They made their choice." Carol nodded, but she still looked sad. She had worked with the council for 10 years. Like Jake, she had believed they could make a difference. Down in the main council chamber, the day's session was starting. Councillor Vexthal from the Zentari. Empire was speaking about mining rights on some distant world. His crystalline body caught the light as he moved, creating rainbow patterns on the walls. Jake had heard this same argument many times before. The Zentari wanted more control over mineral extraction. The hegemony wanted lower prices. The smaller species wanted fair treatment. It was always the same fights, over and over. Usually, Jake would be down there trying to find a middle ground. Humans were good at that. They could see both sides of a problem and find creative solutions. But today, Jake stayed in his office. His communication device buzzed. President Lisa Carter was calling from Earth. "Jake, is everything ready?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. I just signed the withdrawal papers. Admiral Bennett's ships are already moving. To pick up our people." President Carter sighed. "I know this wasn't easy. You believed in this more than anyone." Jake looked at the photo on his desk again. "I still believe in working together, but they have to want it too. You can't build cooperation with people who think you're nothing but children." The president was quiet for a moment. "The Senate voted this morning. Unanimous approval for the withdrawal and our new independent policy. We're done asking for permission to exist." After the call ended, Jake began packing his personal items. There wasn't much. A few books, some gifts from Earth, and pictures of his family. He left all the council documents and reports on the desk. Someone else could deal with. Then now. In the council chamber, the argument about mining rights continued. Councillor Zefter from Zarian was getting angry. His species didn't show emotions the way humans did, but Jake had learned to read the signs. The way Zefter's tentacles moved showed he was frustrated. Trade Minister Kolilin from the hegemony was being stubborn as usual. She refused to compromise on anything. Her people were traders, and they always wanted the best deal possible. If Jake had been there, he would have suggested a rotating schedule for mining operations. Different species could work different areas at different times. It wouldn't give anyone everything they wanted, but it would be fair. That was how humans solved problems. But Jake wasn't there. He was in his office, putting the last of his things into boxes. Security Chief Glenn Parker walked past the chamber and noticed the empty human section. He stopped and frowned. The humans were always there. They arrived early and stayed late. They took notes and asked questions and made suggestions that usually worked. Glenn had been with the council for 20 years. He had seen species come and go, but the humans had been different. They worked harder than anyone else. They volunteered for the dangerous jobs. They stayed calm when everyone else was fighting. He meant to ask someone where the humans were, but then an alarm went off. Pirates. were attacking a cargo ship near the Kepler system. Glenn ran to his office to coordinate the response. On board the human transport ship Endeavour, Captain Amy Rodriguez checked her flight plan one more time. She would pick up Jake and the other humans from the council station, then head straight back to Earth. No stops, no delays. Amy had been flying council missions for 8 years. She had carried diplomats and supplies and refugees. She had been proud to represent humanity among the stars. But like everyone else, she was tired of being treated like a junior partner. The council species all had their specialties. The Centauri were strong and disciplined. The Hegemony were smart traders. The Xerians were great engineers. But the humans were the ones who made it all work together. When different species had problems working together, they called the humans. When their computers couldn't talk to each other, they asked humans to fix it. When their young people got into trouble, they wanted human counselors. But in the council meetings, human votes didn't count as much as the others. Human opinions were interesting, but not important. Human ideas were creative, but not practical. Amy's communication system crackled. It was Admiral Chris Bennett, calling from the fleet command ship. "All human vessels are to return to Earth space immediately," the Admiral said. "Operation Homecoming is now active." Amy had been waiting for that order. She activated her engines and set course for the council station. Back in his office, Jake sealed the last box. Carol was organizing the computer files, making sure nothing important was left behind. "Sir, should I delete the mediation files?" she asked. Jake thought about it. Those files contained solutions to hundreds of disputes between council species. Humans had spent years developing new ways to solve problems peacefully. "Leave them," he said. "Maybe they'll figure out how to use them." Down in the council chamber, the mining dispute was getting worse. Councillor Vextel was threatening to pull Centauri forces out of the Joint Security Fleet. Trade Minister Colilin was talking about raising prices on essential goods. Councillor Morathik from the Outer Rim colonies stood up. "Where are the humans?" she asked. "They always have ideas for situations like this." Several other councillors looked around. The human section had been empty all day. Some of them shrugged. The humans often worked on other projects. They would show up eventually. But Jake Morrison was already walking toward the docking bay, carrying his boxes. Carol Davis was beside him, looking back at the office they were leaving behind. The docking bay was busy as always. Ships from dozens of species came and went, carrying goods and passengers across the galaxy. Jake had spent many hours here, greeting visitors from Earth or saying goodbye to friends. The Endeavour was waiting at docking port 7. Captain Rodriguez met them at the airlock. "Ready to go home, Ambassador?" she asked. Jake looked back at the council station one more time. Somewhere in there, alien politicians were arguing about the same problems they had been fighting about for decades. Without humans to help them find answers, they would probably keep fighting. "I'm ready, Jake," said. The airlock closed behind them. A few minutes later, the Endeavour undocked and turned toward Earth. Jake Morrison, the last human ambassador to the Galactic Council, was going home. Behind them, the council continued its session. No one had noticed that humanity was gone. They would figure it out eventually, but by then it would be too late. The humans were done asking to be treated as equals. From now on, they would show the galaxy what they could do on their own. 3 months had passed since Jake Morrison left the council station. On Earth, he was enjoying breakfast with his wife and daughter for the first time in years. The morning news showed pictures of human colonies growing on 3 different worlds, all outside council space. But on the council station, things were not going well. Councillor Zefter slammed his tentacles on the meeting table. The sound echoed through the chamber like wet ropes hitting stone. Across from him, Trade Minister Colilin's scales had turned bright red, which meant she was very angry. "Your people are stealing our trade routes," Zephyr said. His voice made a bubbling sound that the translation computers turned into words. "We are not stealing anything," Colilin replied. "We are using space that belongs to everyone. Your ships are too slow to compete." The argument had been going on for 6 hours. It was the same argument they had been having for 3 months. The Zarian shipping companies wanted to use the fast lanes through hegemony space. The hegemony wanted to charge them more money than ever before. Counselor Morathic looked around the chamber. "Where are the humans?" she asked again. "They always help us solve problems like this." Supreme Counselor Vekmer shifted in his chair. His bird-like head turned to look at the empty human section. "The humans left the council," he said quietly. "They submitted their withdrawal 3 months ago." The chamber went silent. Many of the counselors stared at the empty seats where Jake Morrison and his team used to sit. "Left?" asked Counselor Vexthul. "Why would they leave?" Vekmer looked uncomfortable. "They said we were not treating them as equal partners." Trade Minister Colilin made a dismissive sound. "Good. Now we can make decisions without their constant suggestions." But Counselor Morathic was frowning. Who is going to mediate this trade dispute? For the first time in Council history, no one had an answer. On the industrial moon of Kepler 442b, Engineer First Class Tony Brooks was having the worst day of his career. The mining operation that fed half the galaxy was breaking down, and he didn't know why. Tony was a Zentari, like Counselor Vexthul. His people were good at following orders and working hard, but they were not good at solving complex problems. For the past year, they had been depending on protocols written by a human engineer named Kate Williams. Kate had visited the moon every few months. She would check the systems, update the computer programs, and fix anything that wasn't working. Right. The mining operation used equipment from 12 different species, and Kate was the only person who understood how to make it all work together. But Kate hadn't come in 3 months. The last message they received from her said she was busy with Earth projects and couldn't visit anymore. Now the quantum extractors were fighting with the hegemony processors. The Zerian transport systems couldn't talk to the Zentari control computers. Warning lights flashed in colors that Tony couldn't read. Tony called his supervisor, Mine Director Krelthak. "Sir, we need help. The systems are failing, and I don't know how to fix them." Krelthak was quiet for a long moment. "Have you tried following Kate Williams' protocols?" "Yes, sir. But they don't cover this problem. The fusion reactors are overheating because the cooling systems can't adjust automatically anymore." "Then call the council. Ask them to send an engineer." Tony tried that. He called the council engineering department and explained the problem. The hegemony engineer who answered told him to reset all the computers and start over. Tony tried that, but it made things worse. He called again and talked to a Zarian technician. She told him to replace all the quantum extractors with newer models. But that would take 6 months and cost more money than the entire moon was worth. His third call, Tony reached a young Zentari engineer who had just graduated from the academy. "Have you tried asking the humans?" the engineer suggested. "The humans left the council," Tony said. "Oh," the engineer replied, "then I don't know what to tell you." Meanwhile, in the security center of the council station, Chief Glenn Parker was looking at reports that made no sense. Pirate attacks were up 300% in the past month. Trade ships were being robbed in areas that had been safe for decades. Smugglers were using routes that the council had blocked years ago. Glenn had 30 years of experience in space security. He had fought in 2 wars and stopped countless criminal operations. But he had never seen anything like this. The pirates weren't just random criminals. They were organized, smart, and they seemed to know exactly where the council's weaknesses were. They attacked supply convoys in places where help would take hours to arrive. They used tactics that Glenn had never seen before. Glenn called Commander Nash Peters, who ran the Council's main patrol fleet. "Nash, what's happening out there? Why can't our ships stop these pirates?" Commander Peters sounded tired. "Glenn, I've been asking myself the same question. Our ships are faster and stronger than theirs, but they keep outsmarting us. How? They don't fight the way we expect. They hit and run. They use asteroid fields for cover. They coordinate attacks across multiple systems at the same time. Our standard tactics don't work against them." Glenn thought about this. Who taught us those standard tactics? There was a long pause. "The humans did," Peter said quietly. "Most of our current strategies came from human advisors." "And where are the human advisors now?" Another pause. "Gone." Glenn ended the call and stared at his computer screen. The reports showed 17 successful pirate attacks in the past week. Before the humans left, they might have 1 or 2 attacks per month, and the pirates usually got caught. He pulled up the old case files and started reading. Every major security operation for the past 10 years had involved human consultants. They were the ones who developed new tactics when the old ones stopped working. They were the ones who could think like criminals and predict what they would do next. Now those humans were gone, and the criminals were winning. Dr. Sandra White sat in her new laboratory on Mars, reading a message that made her both sad and angry. It was from Dr. Velquing, the head of Council Medical Research. The message was begging her to come back. A plague had started on 3 worlds in the Outer Rim, and it was spreading fast. The disease affected multiple species in different ways, and no one understood how to stop it. Sandra had spent 15 years studying cross-species medicine. She was the only person in the galaxy who understood how diseases could jump from one species to another. Her research had saved millions of lives and prevented dozens of epidemics. But the Council had never given her the resources she needed. They treated her work as interesting but not essential. They gave the big research grants to scientists from older species, even when those scientists couldn't produce results. 6 months ago, Sandra had asked for funding to study a new virus that was affecting trade animals. The Council Medical Committee said it wasn't important enough. They spent the money on a project to make Zentari soldiers bigger. Instead, now that same virus had mutated and was killing people across 3-star systems. Sandra deleted Dr. Velqueen's message without answering it. She had work to do on Mars, developing treatments that would keep human colonies safe. The Council had made their choice. Back on the Council station, the trade dispute between the Xerians and the hegemony had gotten worse. Both sides had called in their military fleets. Warships were gathering at the border between their territories. Supreme Counselor Thekmer held an emergency session, but no one knew what to do. The Xerians wouldn't back down. The hegemony wouldn't compromise. Every suggestion led to more arguments. "This is ridiculous," said Counselor Morathik. "We have handled hundreds of trade disputes before." "Yes," said Thekmer, "but we always had human mediators to help us find solutions." The chamber fell silent again. The empty human section seemed bigger now, like a hole in the middle of their government. Trade Minister Kololin looked uncomfortable. "Surely we can solve this ourselves. We are intelligent beings." "Then solve it," challenged Counselor Zefter. "Give me a solution that my people will accept." Kololin opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer. Outside the station, cargo ships waited in long lines. Without the trade agreement, goods couldn't move between systems. Prices were going up. People were getting scared. On Earth, President Lisa Carter read the intelligence reports with interest. The galaxy was starting to realize what they had lost, but it was too late. The humans had moved on. 6 months had passed since humanity left the Council, and engineer Tony Brooks was watching his world die. The mining operation on Kepler 442b had finally stopped completely. The fusion reactors were cold. The quantum extractors sat silent. The transport ships that used to carry precious minerals to every corner of the galaxy now sat empty in the landing bays. Tony stood in the control room, looking at screens full of red warning lights. Everything was broken, and no one knew how to fix it. The human engineer Kate Williams had made it look so easy. She would walk around for a few hours, type some commands into different computers, and somehow make all the alien machines work. Together. Now Kate was gone, and the secrets had gone with her. Mine. Director Krelfak called an emergency meeting. All the senior staff gathered in the main conference room. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the table, but none of them had answers. The situation is critical, Krelfak announced. We produce 30% of the galaxy's rare minerals. Without our operation, the entire Council economy will collapse. Chief Technician Mordal, a hegemony engineer, spoke up. We have tried everything. We brought in experts from every major species. No one can understand the human integration protocols. What about the backup systems? Asked Supervisor Yexton from the Zarian delegation. Tony shook his head. The backup systems depend on the main computers too. Kate designed everything to work together. When one part fails, it all fails. The room fell silent. Outside the windows, they could see the massive mining equipment sitting motionless under the alien sky. Millions of credits worth of machinery, all useless without human knowledge. Meanwhile, in the Council Military Command Center, Admiral Zeekther was having his own crisis. The Zentari fleet was falling apart. The quantum drives that powered their strongest warships needed rare minerals from Kepler 442b for maintenance. Without those minerals, the drives were burning out one by one. His fleet of 300 ships was down to less than 50 that could still fly. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the pirates. Admiral Zeekther stared at the tactical display showing the latest attack. Pirates had hit a medical supply convoy heading to the Outer Rim colonies. They had destroyed 2 escort ships and stolen medicine worth millions of credits. The attack had happened in the Vega system, right in the middle of Council space. It should have been impossible. The Council had patrol ships, sensor networks, and response teams covering every major trade route. But somehow, the pirates knew exactly where the weak spots were. Commander Nash Peters entered the command center, looking exhausted. He had been chasing pirates for weeks without catching any of them. Admiral, we lost another convoy, Nash reported. The pirates hit the grain shipment to New Centauri. Same tactics as before. How many ships did we lose? Zeekther asked. 3 cargo vessels and 1 escort. The pirates were gone before our response team arrived. Zeekther pulled up the tactical records on his screen. The pirate attacks followed patterns that made no sense to him. They struck in multiple places at once, forcing the Council fleet to spread thin. They used unconventional weapons and tactics that Council officers had never trained to counter. Nash, who designed our current patrol strategies? Commander Peters. Looked uncomfortable. Human advisors, sir. The tactics manual was written mostly by Captain Steve Johnson and his team. And where is Captain Johnson now? He returned to Earth when the humans left the Council. Zeekther closed his eyes. The humans had spent years teaching Council forces how to fight pirates and criminals. They had shared their knowledge freely, never asking for anything in return, except respect and equal treatment. Now, that knowledge was working against the Council. The pirates had learned human tactics too, but the Council forces had forgotten how to adapt and improvise the way humans did. On the medical research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, Dr. Vel Queen, was watching people die and feeling completely helpless. The plague that had started in the Outer Rim was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. It had reached 17 worlds now, and the death count was rising every day. The disease seemed to affect every species differently, making it almost impossible to develop treatments. Dr. Velqueen had been the head of Council Medical Research for 20 years. He had supervised hundreds of doctors and scientists from dozens of species, but none of them understood cross-species disease the way Dr. Sandra White had. Sandra had been the Council's expert on how illnesses move between different alien biologies. She could look at a virus and predict how it would affect Centauri, Hegemony, Zarian, and human patients. Her research had prevented countless epidemics. But the Council had never valued her work. They gave her small budgets and old equipment while spending millions on military research. When she asked for help studying dangerous new viruses, they told her it wasn't a priority. Now Sandra was on Mars, working for Earth's independent medical program, and the galaxy was paying the price for losing her. Dr. Velqueen tried calling Sandra again, but she didn't answer. He had sent dozens of messages begging her to come back, offering her anything she wanted: money, equipment, staff, complete control over the medical research program. But Sandra never replied. Dr. Velqueen's assistant, a young Zarian named Tilmic, brought him the latest reports. Sir, the plague has reached the core worlds. 3 cases confirmed on the Hegemony capital. Dr. Velqueen felt sick. The core worlds had the best medical facilities in the galaxy. If the plague was spreading there, nowhere was safe. Have we made any progress on a treatment? He asked. Tilmic shook her head. The research teams can't agree on anything. The Centauri doctors want to try radiation therapy. The Hegemony specialists think genetic modification is the answer. The Zarian team believes in surgical intervention. What about working together? They can't, sir. Each species only understands their own biology. Dr. Sandra was the only one who could see the big picture. Dr. Velqueen slumped in his chair. Sandra White had spent 15 years building bridges between different medical traditions. She had created a unified approach to treating multi-species diseases. Without her, the galaxy's best doctors were working in isolation, making no progress. Back on Earth, Captain Ben Murphy was having a much better day. His cargo ship, New Frontier, had just completed a trade run to the independent colonies in the Tau Ceti system. The colonies were small but growing fast, and they paid well for Earth-made goods. Ben used to work for Council shipping companies, carrying supplies between the major worlds. It was steady work, but the pay was low and the routes were boring. The Council controlled everything, leaving little room for independent traders. Now Ben worked for himself, trading with colonies and settlements that the Council had ignored. These places were hungry for innovation and willing to pay premium prices for human technology and expertise. Ben's communication system buzzed with an incoming message. It was from his old friend Captain Rick Anderson, who still worked for a Council shipping company. Ben, you need to be careful out there, Rick's message said. Pirates are everywhere now. We lost 2 ships just this week. Ben smiled. He had been trading in supposedly dangerous areas for months without any problems. The secret was knowing how to avoid trouble, something humans were naturally good at. The pirates were targeting Council ships because they followed predictable routes and used standard procedures. Human traders like Ben were harder to catch because they changed their plans constantly and used creative solutions to problems. Ben recorded a reply message. Thanks for the warning, Rick, but we're doing fine out here. Maybe you should consider joining us. The independent colonies are looking for experienced captains. On the Council station, Supreme Counselor Thekmer called another emergency session. The trade war between the Zarians and the Hegemony had turned into actual fighting. Both sides had battle fleets facing each other across the disputed border. The Kepler mining crisis was affecting everyone. Without rare minerals, ships couldn't be repaired. The Centauri fleet was mostly grounded. The hegemony was hoarding what minerals they had. The Xerians were desperate enough to consider military action. Counselor Morathic stood up to address the assembly. We are facing the worst crisis in Council history. Our economy is collapsing. Pirates control our trade routes. A plague is spreading through our worlds. And we are on the verge of our first major war in centuries. The chamber was silent. Every counselor knew she was right. How did this happen? Asked Counselor Vexthal. 6 months ago, we were the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Vecmer looked at the empty human section. 6 months ago, we had partners who could solve these problems. Trade Minister Kolalin shifted uncomfortably. Surely we can handle this ourselves. We managed fine before the humans joined us. Did we? Asked Morathic. When was the last time we solved a major crisis without human help? No one could answer that question. For 30 years, humans had been quietly preventing problems, solving disputes, and keeping the galaxy running smoothly. They had been so good at it that everyone else had forgotten how to do those things. Now the humans were gone, and the galaxy was remembering what chaos looked like, but it was too late to ask them to come back. The humans had moved on to building something better. 1 year after humanity left the Council, Counselor Vexthal stood on the observation deck of his flagship and watched his empire crumble dot below him. The planet Centauri Prime burned with riots. The great crystal cities that had stood for thousands of years were dark because there was no power. The quantum generators needed rare minerals from Kepler 442b, and those mines had been silent for 6 months. Vexthal's communication officer approached him carefully. Sir, we have received another independence declaration. The Outer Rim colonies are breaking away from the Empire. How many does that make? Vexthal asked without turning around. 47 systems, sir. They say they cannot depend on us for protection or supplies anymore. Vexthal made a sound like grinding crystal. A year ago, he had commanded the respect of 300 worlds. His fleets patrolled the galaxy, keeping peace and order. Now he could barely hold his own system together. The problem was simple, but impossible to fix. Everything in his empire depended on technology that humans had helped design or maintain. When the humans left, they took their knowledge with them. The Centauri had copies of all the technical manuals, but the manuals didn't explain how to think like a human. Humans had a gift for making different things work together. They could take Centauri discipline, hegemony efficiency, and Xerian creativity, and combine them into something better than any single approach. Without that gift, the Empire's complex systems were falling apart piece by piece. On the Council Station, Trade Minister Kolalin was discovering that being right wasn't always satisfying. She had gotten what she wanted. The humans were gone, and she didn't have to listen to their constant suggestions anymore. The hegemony could make decisions without worrying about human opinions on fairness or cooperation. But now she sat in her office, surrounded by reports of economic collapse, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. The trade war with the Xerians had destroyed the galactic shipping network. Without human mediators to find compromises, both sides had chosen to fight instead of negotiate. Cargo ships sat in orbit around contested systems, unable to deliver their goods. Prices for basic supplies were 10 times higher than they had been a year ago. Kolalin's assistant entered with another stack of reports. Minister, the outer colonies are requesting emergency food shipments. They haven't received supplies in 3 months. What about our standard shipping contracts? Kolalin asked. The shipping companies won't go there anymore. Too many pirate attacks. They want military escorts for every convoy. And our fleet? Half our ships are broken and waiting for parts from Kepler 442b. The other half are fighting the Xerians. Kolilin threw the reports on her desk in frustration. The hegemony had always been the galaxy's greatest traders, but they had forgotten how to handle anything more complicated than simple buying and selling. When problems arose, they had always called in human consultants to figure out creative solutions. Now there were no humans to call, and the problems were getting worse every day. Meanwhile, on Earth, Chief Engineer Paul Stevens was putting the finishing touches on humanity's greatest achievement, yet Paul stood in the control room of the Sol Defense Network, watching as the last orbital platform came online. The defense grid that surrounded Earth was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It used principles that human scientists had learned during their time with the Council, but improved far beyond what the aliens had thought possible. The platforms could communicate instantly across light years using quantum entanglement technology. It could generate energy shields that covered entire planets. Most impressive of all, they could predict and counter attacks before they happened, using adaptive algorithms that learn from every encounter. Paul's team had built the system. In less than a year, working without the bureaucratic restrictions that had slowed down Council projects. They had been free to experiment, to take risks, and to push the boundaries of what was possible. All systems are operational, reported Dr. Maria Lopez from her station. The network is ready for testing. Maria had been working on faster than light communication for 10 years while she was with the Council. The alien scientists had told her that her ideas were too dangerous to pursue. They preferred safe, proven technologies that had been used for centuries. But on Earth, Maria had the freedom to explore her wildest theories. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. The new communication system could send messages across the galaxy in minutes instead of months. More importantly, it was completely secure from any known method of interception. "Paul, we're getting a transmission from the colony ships," Maria announced. "Captain Davis reports successful establishment of our 4th independent colony." Paul smiled. While the Council was falling apart, humanity was expanding into unexplored regions of space. The colony ships carried Earth's newest technologies and brightest minds to worlds that the Council had never even discovered. The colonists weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Without Council regulations limiting their choices, human settlements could adapt quickly to local conditions. They built cities that worked with natural environments instead of fighting against them. They developed new technologies based on what they needed, not what some committee thought was appropriate. Back in Council space, Dr. Velqueen was reading the latest casualty reports from the plague with growing despair. The death toll had reached 50 million beings across 29 worlds. The disease continued to mutate faster than anyone could develop treatments. Worse, it was now affecting species that had seemed immune just weeks before Dr. Velqueen had assembled the greatest medical minds in the galaxy. But they couldn't work together effectively. Each species approached the problem differently, and none of them could see the bigger picture that connected all the pieces. His communication system chimed with an incoming message. Dr. Velqueen's heart jumped when he saw it was from Dr. Sandra White on Mars. "Dr. Velqueen," Sandra's recorded message began, "I've been following reports of the plague outbreak. While I can't return to Council space, I want you to know that Earth's medical research program has developed a treatment protocol." Dr. Velqueen leaned forward eagerly. "However," Sandra continued, "the treatment requires understanding of cross-species genetic interaction that your current teams don't possess. I've attached the basic research, but implementing it will require cooperation between all your medical departments. Something I tried to teach for 15 years. The message ended there. Dr. Velqueen opened the attached files and found himself looking at research that was years ahead of anything the Council had produced. Sandra's work showed not just how to treat the current plague, but how to prevent future outbreaks by understanding the connections between different species' immune systems. But as Sandra had warned, the treatment required precise coordination between Centauri, hegemony, and Zarian medical techniques. It needed the kind of cooperation that only humans had been able to achieve. Dr. Val Queen called an emergency meeting of all his department heads. When they gathered in the conference room, he explained Sandra's research and what it would require. "This is impossible," declared Dr. Morthick, the Centauri medical chief. "Our healing methods are completely different from theirs." He pointed at the hegemony representative. "Our techniques are too advanced for your people to understand," replied Dr. Vesquine from the hegemony medical department. The Zarian doctor, Dr. Lixara, shook her head. "We would need to share our most secret medical knowledge. That violates our security protocols." Dr. Velqueen watched them argue and felt a deep sadness. Sandra had given them the answer to their crisis, but they couldn't use it because they had never learned to work together the way humans did. On the bridge of his patrol ship, Commander Nash Peters received yet another distress call from a merchant. Convoy under pirate attack. It was the third attack today, and Nash knew he wouldn't reach them in time. The pirates had become incredibly bold. They operated in groups now, hitting multiple targets simultaneously. They used tactics that Council forces couldn't counter, because the tactics had been designed by humans who understood how to think creatively about warfare. Nash's tactical officer looked up from his station. "Sir, the pirate fleets are using modified human designs. Someone is teaching them our own strategies. How is that possible?" Nash asked. "Some of the pirates might be former Council security personnel, beings who learned human tactics during joint operations." Nash realized the horrible truth. The Council's own people were using human knowledge against them. The pirates weren't just random criminals anymore. They were organized forces led by beings who understood both human tactics and Council weaknesses. His communication system crackled with another distress call, then another. The pirates were attacking everywhere at once, and Nash's fleet was too small and too scattered to respond effectively. Meanwhile, on the independent human colony of New Harmony, Captain Amy Rodriguez was reading intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. The reports came from human traders who had contacts throughout the galaxy. They painted a clear picture of the Council's collapse. Systems were declaring independence. Trade networks were breaking down. Military forces couldn't maintain order. 18 months after humanity's quiet departure, Supreme Counselor Thekmer stood alone in the Great Council chamber, looking at empty seats where representatives from 43 species used to sit. The chamber that once held delegates from across the galaxy now echoed with silence. Most species had withdrawn from the Council to protect their own worlds. Others had simply stopped sending representatives because they couldn't afford the travel costs anymore. Thekmer's aide, a nervous young Zirian named Piletex, approached with the day's reports. "Sir, 3 more systems have declared independence. The Vega colonies, the mining stations at Wolf 359, and the agricultural worlds in the Centauri sector." "How many systems remain under Council authority?" Thekmer asked quietly. 17, sir. Down from over 800 at our peak." Thekmer closed his eyes. The Galactic Council, which had ruled space for over 2,000 years, was dying. Not from war or natural disaster, but from its own inability to function without the humans they had taken for granted. "Sir," Piletex continued carefully, "we have received another message from the human delegation at the edge of our system. For 3 weeks, a small human diplomatic ship had been waiting at the border of Council space. They claimed to represent something called the Earth Alliance, and they wanted to discuss humanitarian aid for plague victims. Thekmer had refused to see them. His pride wouldn't let him admit that the mighty council needed help from the species they had dismissed as primitives. But now, with his civilization collapsing around him, pride seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. "Tell them I will meet with them," he said finally. An hour later, Ambassador Alana Foster walked into the council chamber, accompanied by 2 aides. She moved with quiet confidence, showing respect for the ancient hall without any sign of fear or submission. Vecmer studied her carefully. Alana was young for a human diplomat, probably in her 40s. She had been a junior member of Jake Morrison's staff before the withdrawal. Now she spoke for Earth and its growing alliance of independent worlds. "Supreme Counselor," Helena said with a polite nod, "thank you for agreeing to see us." "What do you want?" Detmer asked bluntly. Elena didn't seem offended by his rudeness. "We want to help. The plague has killed over 100 million beings. Our medical teams have developed treatments that could save lives. At what price? No price. We're offering humanitarian aid because it's the right thing to do." Detmer stared at her in confusion. "You want nothing in return?" "We want nothing from the council," Helena clarified. "But we would like to work directly with individual worlds that need help. No political strings attached." It was a clever offer. Elena was making it clear that Earth didn't recognize the council's authority anymore, but they were willing to help suffering people regardless of politics. "Why?" Vecmer asked. "After everything that happened, why would you help us?" Elena's expression softened slightly. "Because that's who we are. We don't help people to gain power over them. We help them because they need help." Meanwhile, on the edge of the Sol system, Admiral Chris Bennett was reviewing the latest intelligence reports from his flagship. The human fleet had grown dramatically over the past year and a half, not through military conquest, but through defensive necessity and alliance building. Captain Amy Rodriguez entered his ready room carrying a data pad. "Admiral, we've received formal requests to join the Earth Alliance from 12 more species. That brings our total membership to 37. Chris nodded. The Earth Alliance had become everything the Galactic Council should have been. Member species contributed according to their abilities and received help according to their needs. Decisions were made by consensus, with every voice valued equally." "What about the former Council worlds?" Chris asked. 43 systems have declared independence from the Council in the past month. Most of them are asking about alliance membership or at least trade agreements. Chris looked at the star charts on his wall. Red markers showed Council territory, which was shrinking every week. Blue markers showed alliance worlds, which stretched across a quarter of the galaxy now. Green markers showed independent systems that traded with Earth, but hadn't joined the alliance yet. The pattern was clear. Humanity's quiet exit from the Council had triggered the creation of something much better. The alliance was growing not through conquest or intimidation, but because it offered what beings actually wanted: respect, cooperation, and mutual benefit. "Any word from the diplomatic mission to the Council station?" Chris asked. Ambassador Foster reports that the Supreme Counselor has agreed to accept medical aid. Our hospital ships are preparing to deploy to the affected worlds. Chris smiled slightly. Even now, with the Council collapsing, humanity was choosing to help rather than gloat. It was the difference between building something better and just tearing down what already existed. On the planet New Harmony, Dr. Sandra White was training a mixed team of doctors from 6 different Alliance species. The team was preparing to deploy to Council space to help fight the plague. "Remember," Sandra told her students, "each species will react differently to the treatment. Zentari patients need higher doses because of their crystalline biology. Hegemony patients need careful monitoring because their metabolism runs faster. Zarian patients may have allergic reactions to the base compounds." Dr. Tilmer, a young Zentari who had left the Council Medical Service to join the Alliance, raised her hand. Dr. White, how did you learn to see these connections between different biologies? Sandra smiled. By listening. Most medical research focuses on one species at a time. But diseases don't respect species boundaries. To fight them effectively, you have to understand how all biology works together. It was a lesson that the council medical establishment had never learned. They had departments for Centauri medicine, hegemony medicine, and Zarian medicine, but no one who studied how they all connected. Sandra had spent years trying to teach them about integrated medicine, but they had always dismissed her ideas as too complicated. Now, in the Alliance, integrated medicine was the standard approach. Young doctors from different species learned together, sharing knowledge and developing treatments that worked for everyone. Dr. Kexelin, a former hegemony researcher, spoke up. The council doctors are requesting copies of our treatment protocols. Give them everything, Sandra said immediately. This isn't about politics. It's about saving lives. Some of her students looked surprised. After the way the council had treated human researchers, they expected Sandra to be bitter. We don't withhold medical knowledge for political reasons, Sandra explained. That's one of the things that makes us different from them. Back on Earth, President Lisa Carter was addressing the Global Assembly in Geneva. Representatives from every human colony and Earth nation had gathered to discuss humanity's role in the changing galaxy. 18 months ago, we made the difficult decision to leave the Galactic Council, President Carter said. Today, I can report that this decision has led to the greatest period of growth and cooperation in human history. The Assembly Hall was packed with delegates wearing the uniforms of dozens of different Alliance species. The sight would have been impossible under the Council system, where humans were always the junior partners. The Earth Alliance now includes 37 species across a quarter of the galaxy, President Carter continued. Our colonies are thriving. Our technology is advancing faster than ever before. Most importantly, we are building the kind of galactic civilization we always dreamed of, one based on equality, respect, and mutual benefit. Former Ambassador Jake Morrison, now serving as Earth's Minister of Alliance Relations, stood to address the Assembly. The Council taught us an important lesson. Sometimes you have to walk away from a bad situation before you can build something better. Jake thought about his old office on the Council station, where he had spent 5 years trying to make humanity's voice heard. He had believed that patience and persistence would eventually earn human respect. He had been wrong, but leaving the Council hadn't been a failure. It had been the first step toward creating something infinitely better. On the Council station, Councillor Morothic was cleaning out her office. The few remaining Council members had voted to dissolve the government. There was simply nothing left. To govern. She picked up a framed photo showing the Council at its height, with representatives from hundreds of species working together in the Great Chamber. In the corner of the photo, she could see Jake Morrison and his human delegation, taking notes and listening carefully to every speaker. For 30 years, the humans had been the most dedicated members of the Council. They had worked harder, contributed more, and asked for less than any other species. They had been the glue that held the diverse alliance together, but the older species had been too, proud to admit how much they depended on human creativity and adaptability. They had treated Earth as a junior partner right up until the day the humans quietly walked away. Morothic packed the photo in her personal belongings. She was planning to request asylum in Alliance space. Like many former Council members, she had come to realize that humanity's new organization offered everything the Council had promised, but never delivered. As she left her office for the last time, she passed the empty human section of the chamber.